This is episode 9 of the What's a Hero podcast, with me, your host, Ken Frownfelter. You may remember episode 5, 6, and 7 with my guest, Ron Gutekunst. Unfortunately, I'm starting off this podcast on a somber note. On January 18, 2021, Ron succumbed to the cancer that had riddled his body and passed away in the early morning hours. He was a man that loved his life, his family, his friends, his God, and America. He was a stalwart patriot that was the epitome of what a hero is. He gave so much of himself so others could be free, happy, and healthy. He always had a smile to share and dad jokes aplenty, even if he wasn't your dad. He was a great man who we lost way too early in life. Ron was always himself, never worrying about what others thought of him, but always putting others first. He could be goofy and fun, but had an unmatched work ethic and sense of duty. I was recently told some people thought that he was a mean jerk at one point, but then realized he wasn't after his brain tumor had been removed. Then they realized, I guess it was just the tumor that made him snappy, because he was back to his happy self once the tumor was gone. We may never realize what someone else is going through, and unfortunately we assume we have it the worst because we rarely take time to look at the big picture and put others first. Ron did that throughout his life, and he will be sorely missed for it. Take the time to put others first and learn from their lives. Ron had laid his life out there for all to hear, knowing he did not have much time left. His hope was that his failings and mistakes, problems, successes, happiness, joy, and love could all be used to better those that knew him and heard him. Never think you have nothing to offer. Ron didn't, because he was the answer to the name of this podcast. He was what a hero is. We love you, sir, and we will surely miss you.
What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter. Today's guest is a good friend of mine. They've not only been a dispatcher for a number of years, but they've held multiple other jobs, and they've done a lot of things that have been directly related to helping other people and doing things for other people. Not only is this person a dispatcher for police, fire, medical, and then anything else that I wouldn't say truck drivers, not a truck driver dispatcher, but a regular dispatcher. But they're also a National Guard Army veteran. So I want to welcome Susie
Hello.
To the podcast. How you doing, Susie?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, as I mentioned, you're a dispatcher, and you're a veteran, and you've been a dispatcher for
going on 5 years.
Go ahead and pull that mic real close to you. Not real close. There you go. That's probably pretty good.
Okay.
And you've been doing that for 5 years. Before that, you held a number of jobs. I guess trying to figure out where you want to go and what you want to be.
Yeah, I'm still doing that.
Yeah, and then, but you're also a veteran, and not just I used to be in the National Guard or I used to be in the Army, but you currently are.
Yeah, I'm still in the National Guard.
As a working dispatcher.
Yes.
That's not
busy
something.
life.
Yeah, that's not something you hear every day, and so that's fantastic. And I want to get into that a little bit, but before we get into that, I want to go, like I do with everybody else. We're going to go back in time, and so I called you Susie because that's the name that everybody calls you, Susie. Mm-hmm. You're not going to go with Suzanne or it's your in trouble name.
Susan is my in trouble name.
Okay, and your in trouble name or going to court name. And you're not
God.
going. You're
Not
doing
planning on
any of those.
that.
Yeah.
We'll see how the day goes.
But we're going to go far back to little Susie.
Mm-hmm. She was kind of a shithead. That's the best way I can put it.
Cool. What? So she's who she is.
Yes.
But what was she doing? What was her plan?
Well,
I'm just going to play and I'm going to get in trouble and I'm going to.
Well, I didn't actually get in trouble a lot, but I this might surprise you. I've always been very outspoken.
Yeah.
And
No, I didn't see that coming.
when my dad, he's actually my adoptive dad, and he came into our lives when I was about 3, I think. Mm-hmm. And we would get in full-blown arguments, me being 3-year-old little Susie with my hands on my hips, just arguing with this grown man. And my mom's like, "You're the adult. Stop arguing with her. Just tell her like it is." And I was like, "No, I don't want to listen.
I'm the adult."
Yeah, well, I was the youngest, too, of all sorts of kids, and I wanted to be my own person and not listen to anybody else. My older sisters, man, I gave them a run for their money, but
Yeah.
they love me. It's fine.
And so you as growing up, were you outside kid? Were you an inside kid? Did you just...
Outside kid. So we lived in this old house. It was probably over 100 years old when I was a kid, and it's still standing. I still check on it on Zillow and stuff to look at it because I loved that house. But we would go out in the backyard, and I'd pretend like I was an archaeologist and like dig up old stuff, and you'd find all sorts of weird things, primarily like old silverware and stuff like that. But I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, I think about, if you get, you find like an old spoon or old fork or something like that buried in the ground. Mm-hmm. What's the story behind that? Where did that thing come from? Who dropped it? How long ago did they drop it?
Yep.
What were they doing when they dropped it? Was it a picnic? Was it a, you got to think about that. And so then you're going back to the past even further and looking at things that, had no connection with you until now.
And most importantly, are there ghosts? Like, that's been a thing I've always asked since I was a kid.
Are there ghosts in that house or in any house that you live in?
Oh, absolutely. I swear that house was haunted.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you bring that up, people want to know, tell us a story where you think that. Give us some kind of
so there was
evidence.
One vivid night that I remember I went to bed on time, which was weird because I would always fight that. But I was sleeping, and I woke up, and I was, like, looking in my doorway, and I thought I saw an adult, and I couldn't figure out who it was. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was, like, my dad or my aunt, which my aunt wasn't even there, so I don't know why I thought that, but it was really weird. And then it was just this figure, and they, like, looked at me, and they walked away, and it was a man. And so I ran down the hall, and my parents were in their own room, so it was, like, no one there. And I was like, oh, that's creepy. But I wasn't scared. I just thought it was, like, the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then my sisters had a couple of weird experiences, too, where they thought, like, the dog or something was in their room and, like, moving around, but there was no one in their room. So, yeah, I thought that house was super cool, and I swear it's still haunted to this day.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. So you're growing up, and you have ghosts watching you.
Yeah,
obviously. But you're an outside kid. Mm-hmm. You play outside all the time with all your brothers and sisters and get in fights with them?
Yeah, my oldest sister's still mad at me to this day where she was left in... We were latchkey kids, and so we'd go home after school, and she'd always be in charge. And I guess I was arguing with her one day, and she was arguing back, so apparently, and I don't remember this, so I don't think it's true, but I spit in her face. And both my older sisters swear to this, so there's my middle sister, and she, like, had to hold my other sister back, and I just took off running, I guess.
And so she's still mad at you?
Oh, to this day.
Yeah.
But I'm also mad at my other sister to this day, because we were, like, cleaning our rooms, supposed to be, and I was actually on the floor, like, picking up my toys, and she was taking a nap, and we started arguing. And so she pouted, and my leg was extended out, and she stepped on my leg to be just a brat. And so I started yelling at her, and my dad came upstairs and yelled at me because, of course, I'm the loudest.
Sure.
And he's like, get to work and start cleaning your room. And I got in trouble, and she's like, ha! And she thinks it's hilarious. My nieces and nephews
So
it's the funniest story.
This is the stuff that gets brought up at Christmas and Thanksgiving and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you go back home and everybody's like, yeah, well, you stupid, you stepped on my leg.
You
well,
spit in my
you spit in my
face.
face.
Yeah.
So you're outside, you're playing, you're spitting in each other's face, stepping on each other's legs, having a good time. But where does that path lead you to become? I mean, did you get into school? I mean, were you much younger than everybody, or just a year or two? Or?
So I'm 4 years younger than my oldest sister and 3 years younger than my middle sister.
All right. So by the time you're getting into high school and stuff like that, you're pretty much your own. They're not thinking, oh, you're so-and-so's sister. No,
no, they are. So my dad was my vice principal at my high school.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, so people knew who I was before I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad would, my sisters always tell this story of, at the beginning of the school year in high school, he'd go in there. He's a big guy. He used to play professional football.
Oh, cool.
And he'd go into the weight room and be like, you want to date my daughter? And then he'd, bench press this ridiculous amount of weight and, and just walk out.
Needless to say, nobody ever...
No, we didn't have a lot of dates in high school.
Yeah. So you go through school,
mm-hmm.
and I play sports. You do various things you like to do? Or?
I played some sports. I played volleyball and basketball. I ended up quitting those. I got injured, and I had to have knee surgery this summer between 8th and 9th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we are prone to injury in my family. All my sisters and I have sprained and broken our ankles multiple times. It's just
good thing
a
you got
genetic
two of them.
thing. I know, right? It's the same one that I kept doing it to.
Oh, that's good.
I ended up I played music for many years, and I was in the band. I'm a band nerd. I was in the choir, and I did theater.
What'd you play?
The oboe.
The oboe. That's people say, I played trumpet, I saxophone, I did trombone.
No.
Nobody ever says the oboe.
I know. So I started out as the clarinet. They didn't have oboe in 5th grade band. That was, you got to start playing something easy to play hot cross buns and stuff. And
so what was the I guess the most famous song when I think of the oboe?
There's a song called The Swan. It's a classical
song. What about Peter and the Wolf? Isn't that the oboe too?
I don't know. That story brings up terrible memories for me, because my dad, every time he caught any of us lying, he would sit us down and he would tell us that story every time.
Yeah.
I've heard it a million times.
Well, I think if you look up that story, it's the oboe that's the primary
It probably is.
instrument.
That sounds familiar.
Weird. Look at that connection.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even know you had that, but that's...
My dad would be so proud.
Anyways, you said that you did band and choir and drama,
mm-hmm.
like theater and stuff like
mm-hmm.
that, in plays and all that?
I was, in high school I wasn't in plays. I ended up doing a lot of the tech stuff. I wanted to be in plays, and I couldn't. So people look at theater, they're like, oh my God, theater nerds, whatever. And it's actually far more challenging than people realize. And I remember there was this one instance where we had this competition that we had to do. And I had to prepare a monologue for it. And in all honesty, I didn't prepare the monologue. They tell you, read the whole play, know what you're talking about, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't do that. But I memorized the monologue, and I practiced it. And then I went in, and I mother ducking nailed that thing. And I actually ended up going to the competition, and then I won that competition.
Without a ton of prep.
And so I always wanted to be an actress when I was younger. I know it sounds cliche, but I really did. That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And then I I took a couple of years off because I couldn't afford to go to college right away. And then I ended up going to college, and I pursued music and theater. And music I was just burnt out on, because even in high school I was doing private lessons and quartets and, the symphony and stuff like that. And then in college it got more intense, and you had more time that you had to practice and all this other stuff. And I got burnt out on it. And so I put all my focus into theater, and I loved it. It was a ton of fun.
Musical theater or just...
I tried out for some of the musical theater, and I could sing, but it just wasn't my jam. It's not something I was real passionate about.
Right.
But I was in a few plays at the college that I was going to, and we did a play called The White Plague, And I had to give this monologue. Basically, I was dying, and we had to do our makeup as if we had the plague, and it was like made out of latex and oatmeal is what we used.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it looked really cool. It looked really gross, but it looked really cool. And then my favorite one that I was in, and so you have like your main stage that you do your big productions on, and then we had a theater called a Black Box, which is just like a little room, and so the audience is on 3 sides of you.
Okay.
And we did the Jungle Book, like the original one, and that one was super cool. So I played the mom wolf, and I played the human mom too.
Oh, okay.
And in that one, I got to like make up my own language for the human mom because she couldn't speak English. So they're like, "You need to create a language." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, some of the great people have done that. You know,
Yeah.
those people that the guy that wrote Lord of the Rings, he makes up his own language. The guys that do, you know, Star Trek, they have Klingon, and they have all these other languages and all these. And so you get to do that too now because you're one of the greats. Is that what you're saying?
No, let's not go that far.
Oh, I thought. Okay, never mind.
But it was super fun, and I do remember like I made up the word Rashna for fire and stuff like that. And we had there were multiple levels the way that they built this set. So at one point, like when Wolf Mom protects Mowgli and her little cubs from Shere Khan,
right?
Like I had to jump down from this, and we had to practice animal movements and stuff like that.
Oh, you broke your ankle again?
No.
Okay.
Not that time.
Okay.
But I had to like jump down and like basically scare Shere Khan away, and my little itty bitty cousins were in there, and I made him cry, which means I was doing my job as an actor. I was doing really well,
right?
But I felt bad about that. Whoops.
You had to go back later. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. But
so let's go back to high school because you jumped to college really quick. You're doing all this theater and so you figure theater and choir and all that stuff, and you figure, I think this is where I want to go. And was that the direction you were kind of going, or were you kind of leaning towards other things, or?
That's kind of the direction I was going. So I've always struggled. I've been a person that struggles with whether I feel like I can do something or not.
Right.
Like I would end up holding myself back because I was like, ugh, I can't do that. Or, you know.
But nothing tells you that except your own head, right?
Except
there's nothing,
my own head,
There's
yes.
nothing, nobody said, hey, you're not going to be able
No.
to. There's no, you don't have the funds for it. There's nothing that says you can't except for your own
brain
person telling
working
you.
against me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you start figuring, hey, I want to do something more, and I want to do these things, but do I want to do that? And so you become kind of indecisive, I'm guessing, huh?
Yeah, I do. So I always have interests in all sorts of different areas. So I also wanted to play sports.
Right.
But my brain talked me out of that. So actually in my senior and junior year, I ended up I was in track, nothing with running. I still hate running to this day. It's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taught me a couple lessons,
Right?
mostly in my knees or my...
Right? Yeah, my knees are shot. But I did the shot put and discus and something else. Something to do with throwing and hoisting. I'm built for strength, not speed, and I was always really good at that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try that. I wanted to try and play volleyball again, but I was too late. Like, I took too many years off to get back into the level that I needed to be.
Oh, right. Yeah. So you go to college and like university or like junior college or?
It was university.
So you go to a university, you go finish that, you get your degree.
Nope. Welcome to the winding road of Susie's life.
Right. So you go into debt?
Yeah.
So you go into debt, don't
Big
get anything
debt.
for it.
I didn't finish my last year. I'm like 30 credits away from graduating with that particular degree in theater.
Right.
I'm not that far. I could literally go back next year and finish it. So I ran out of money, and I ended up working all through college. I was also working, and I took the job at the grocery store that I was working at full time, and I got stuck in a rut. Like, I was not happy with where my life was going. The job, it's really easy to fall into complacency and contentment.
Right.
Even though you're not content, it's
easy.
It's easy.
Right.
And so I stayed at that job for quite a long time, and I had some friends there, but we were all in our 20s and made poor choices. There was a lot of alcohol. We drank a lot. I don't know how I did it, but we'd drink, and then I'd go to work, and I was You hit a certain age. I remember the age for me was 27, where you get hungover and you would just want to die the next day. And
right. No, yeah, those where you're like, what? Why do I feel this way? Because last night you did things you shouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel like garbage.
Yep.
And so, so you're there making poor choices, working this grocery store job that you don't want to be working at,
mm-hmm.
and you're like, it's paying the bills, it's doing what I need to do.
And I was good at it. In all honesty, I became a manager pretty quick in the deli, which is like the worst place in any grocery store to work. Mm-hmm. Everybody will tell you.
Familiar.
And so I was just thought, there's got to be something more. And I eventually joined the National Guard. I joined real late.
So what made you decide that? Were you were doing this and you're just like, you saw a commercial on TV or what'd you do?
We have a lot of military people in my family, not in my generation, but in generations past. And
right.
like my grandpa, my mom's dad, he fought in the Korean War. He lost his leg. He actually was a POW and lost his U.S. citizenship. And then
wow.
General MacArthur is the one that got it back for him. There's a really long, super cool story for that.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. And he got his citizenship back, and then he continued fighting, and then he ended up getting essentially blown up, and he had shrapnel in his leg, and one of his legs he had to lop off, which ended up making great fun for the grandkids. So, like, at family dinners and things like that, he and my uncles would pretend to get in arguments, and they'd, like, rip his legs off to scare the kids around. Oh, yeah. Big jokester. It was a lot of fun. He was probably one of the funniest people I ever met in my life.
That's hilarious.
So, and I, my senior year was September 2001.
Uh-huh.
Like, it started, it was like 3 days later that happened.
Right.
And I wanted to join the military. I wanted to, fight for my country. That the amount of patriotism that people felt at that time.
It was huge.
It was huge, absolutely. And I felt that too, and I wanted to. I've always struggled with my weight, though, and I was not in a place to join the military.
Right.
And my mental toughness was not there to work to get to that point
mm-hmm.
so that I could. So I just ended up, like, not doing it. But it was always something that I wanted to do. And so I got in my 20s, and I was 26, working at the grocery store, just, like, not progressing in my life. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do this. And I worked my ass off, too. I was still overweight, but not where I was in high school. And I got in shape. I worked with them. I took the ASVAB, and my GT score was pretty good, so I could pretty much do whatever I wanted, but they only had certain openings at that point. At least that's what the recruiter told me. So
for sure.
Because they're recruiters, never trust them.
They're veteran car salesmen.
Absolutely.
If you're a recruiter, dude, thank you. You do. Honestly, you do good work. However, as a recruiter,
we know your games.
We know your games, and that is not the totality of your service.
Yes.
You get to go do what you want to do, and then for a time you get to go be some recruiter, and then go back to the So, but that's what they have to do, because mm-hmm. how easy is it to talk a teenager or a kid in their 20s who all they do is drink,
mm-hmm.
and to, hey, give up everything. Let us tell you what to do, how to do it, what to wear, how to wear it. Go through all these different things. Oh, we're going to send you away from your family, and we're going to put people shooting at you. So we're going to go and do that too. How do you talk somebody into doing that?
Yeah.
Right? So they have to kind of play these games, and it's understandable, but they're car salesmen.
They are.
So he tells you only have a couple of...
There were a couple of options. It was for the battalion that I was going to enter into, and that's why there's only a certain number of jobs. It's an infantry battalion, but at that time females couldn't join infantry.
Right.
So I ended up going with communications, commo nerd crap, and it was not something that I was ever interested in.
Right. Putting a headset on and talking into a mouthpiece or whatever.
Yeah, look at me now.
Yeah.
But, and there's a lot to go along with it. So the job that I do is a 25 uniform. It's basically like you primarily work with radios and stuff, but
right.
you know a little bit about everything. They're essentially the like multi-tool of communication stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so I worked super hard, and it took about a year for me to actually get to go to basic training.
Just because you are losing weight?
Well, losing weight, and also the National Guard's a little different on the way that they recruit, and sometimes it takes longer, and at that time it was taking longer to get people shipped out to wherever they were going.
Because this is all post 9/11.
It is.
And you said about a year after 9/11? Or?
Yeah, so no. This is way in 2009 is when I started talking to him.
Oh, okay.
And then 2010 was when I went to boot camp. It was like the end of 2009 when I was working with him. I guess it was a little less than a year. And so I shipped off to Fort Jackson, in Jackson.
Yeah.
And, did my basic training. It was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be significantly harder than what I was doing. Yeah.
You've seen enough movies or whatever. You're my gosh, I'm going to turn me into Rambo. And then all of a sudden, I got time off.
Well, no. We didn't. They weren't at the time off stage really. There, we had Sundays that, you had to be busy on those days. They were kind of rest days. Like we didn't have required training that we were doing besides taking apart and putting back together your weapon 8,000 times and cleaning it. But those were your days that you could do. You had to do your deep cleaning, barracks maintenance, and stuff like that.
So you're in your mid-20s at this point?
Late 20s. 26, 27.
Were you the oldest person in your...
I wasn't. There was a 42-year-old there.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There was a big jump. It was me. I was the second oldest, and then this guy who joined, he was 42.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you were a manager at a grocery store. You said you progressed pretty quickly. You did all these things. And you're one of the oldest people in your platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any aspirations to be like leadership in that, or you just said, I'm good. I will just learn the job so I can go do my job? Or?
Well, I had a piece of advice that the person told me, just do what you're told, and don't be overzealous. Don't try and, don't be noticed.
Right.
Well, it's not just because of my age, but also, again, like I'm kind of bossy.
Sure.
Leadership qualities, So I ended up being in a lot of leadership roles all throughout my training.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one point where they do a soldier of the cycle board for every group that goes through. And so for my platoon, they put me in through that, and I choked. It's not that I wasn't prepared. I was absolutely prepared, but I just wasn't prepared for their shenanigans that they had. You walk in there and the chair's upside down and, you have to ask permission to move it and stuff like that. But the one thing that I choked on, and I was so mad at myself, was they ask you who is the leader of the Army. And the way that they phrased it, your answer is the President of the United States. But the way that they phrased it, I was like, oh, our battalion commander.
Right.
And so I said that person's name, and they're like, no.
No, you're incorrect.
Yeah. And so I went back, and my drill sergeant was like, what happened? And I was like, I choked. And that's all I could say. I was really disappointed in myself.
Yeah.
And so the whole purpose of that was to put you in charge of our training battalion. And the person that they did end up putting in charge of the training battalion was not necessarily the best.
Right. They just answer the questions right. And
people test really well, and
Sure.
the people that don't test really well, it doesn't mean that you can't do the job.
Right.
And so I ended up working a lot and being like that leader, even though I didn't have the title.
Right. And people still, let me guess, people still respected you and came to you with questions and concerns. And then asking you to try to right whatever wrong they had with another.
Mm-hmm. They called me mom a lot. I was the barracks mom for a long time.
Because you're
basic
older.
Training.
You're 4 years older than everybody. And
yeah.
Whatever. That's awesome that you're able to do that. It's hard that you can't, I can't put it on a resume or anything like that.
Mm-mm.
That sort of stuff, in the long run, I guess in the short run, that matters. In the long run, that honestly doesn't matter, because people are going to look at who you were, what you were to them, and the relationships you had with them. And so, you're kicking yourself because, I could have got a pay raise, or I could have got this, or I could have got that. But it is what it is.
It was more so disappointment in myself, but I think I made up for it in AIT, which is what you go to after your basic training.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you go to your specific school, and there I worked my ass off there, and I was in charge of everything. Like I was our platoon sergeant there, student platoon sergeant, whatever.
Sure.
I was also, so you have your platoon sergeant for at the barracks, and then you have your sergeant for the actual school part of it, and I was in charge there. And then I ended up, like, the way that they did CQ, which is guarding the desks at night or whatever.
Right.
The way that they were doing that schedule just seemed ridiculous to me, so I made up a spreadsheet and, like, changed the way that they did that at TRADOC for and they liked that. And there were times, one of the things that my dad always taught me, he's one of the greatest leaders that I know, and they enforce this a lot in the military, at least they try to, is you put your soldiers before yourself.
Right.
And so there were times when, you had those empty spots in CQ, or, we were running short on time to go get chow or whatever it was. And so, I always made sure, because I would hear my dad in the back of my head going, take care of them first. And so there was one point that I probably went a little too far with it, and I worked the CQ desk overnight, like 3 nights in a row, and then you have school and stuff. So I literally didn't sleep for 3 days until my drill sergeant was like, you are going to sleep now.
Because you're walking and falling asleep.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so they let me sleep for like 16 hours. They're like, don't bother her. She's there.
Right. I heard a thing, I don't know if I read it or I heard it. The idea was, however, it was like a little mantra, and it said team mission self.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a leader, you've got to consider the team first, and then you consider what the mission is, and then you can concern yourself with yourself and say, okay, I'm going to make sure the team's good. Are they good family-wise? Are they good in their own brains? Are they good with their training? Do they know what they're doing? They know how to do it? Are there issues with them? Once they're good to go and they know what to do and they know how to do it, then you can start working on, okay, and here's the mission that we have to go for. And then once you get that done, then you can start working on yourself and saying, okay, am I good? Can I do? I mean, obviously, if you're not in place, you have to be honest with yourself and say, I'm not there. I'm not. And then if you're not good for them, or if you're not good for yourself, you're not going to be good for them.
Absolutely.
And so that's the ultimate thing. So like you said, you got to put them first. And so just consider that team mission self thing. And if you can go off of that little mantra, then you can start working towards, really developing the morale that comes from leadership,
Yes. And, leadership is something that I'm very passionate about.
Right.
I've experienced a lot of good leaders and a lot of bad leaders. And I think one of the qualities that a good leader must have is that introspection. Like, you have to be able to look at yourself and see, am I overextending? Am I putting enough out there? Am I taking care of my people? Am I the one that's fucking up right now, or is it them? Like, where is this coming from? Whatever discourse there is, like, where's the source? Yeah.
Have you tried to put their oxygen mask on before you put yours on? Are you ready to help them and guide them and lead them? And so, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's something that I brought it up with George on the last podcast, and I forget where I was going with it. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
So, anyways, no, but you're right. You have to work on that whole thing of going, doing what you need to do, and making sure that you can do it. Because if the problem is you've got to be able to look at yourself and say, oh, here's what I remember what it was. The idea that you want to be able to show people, and maybe I brought it up with Frank. I don't remember if it was George or Frank a couple episodes ago. Basically, you're working to try to impress people, but you're not trying to impress people. You're always trying to put your best foot forward and interview, but you're not interviewing. You're doing the best you can, and you care about what people think, but you don't care about what people think. There's this weird dichotomy where you're doing, yes, I care what these people think because I don't want them thinking that I can't do this and they can't look to me. But at the other side of it, I don't care what you think because I'm going to do what needs to be done in the grand scheme of things for the mission.
Well, and that, I think it all goes to intent of why you care what they think.
Right.
Because everybody cares about what other people think about them. We'd like to say that we don't, it plays a part in how we react to things, and it plays a part in our goals and, you know, our actions.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly right. Why, you know, and I mentioned it, this one I know I mentioned on the last podcast, is you put your best foot forward, but what's the best foot that you have? Mm-hmm. What's the best foot you want them to see? Mm-hmm. You know, and how does that work? So that's absolutely right. So I think you were on the right track. At least you were thinking that back then in your late 20s. Yep. Which is not something that a lot of people in the late 20s are thinking about. They're thinking about, you know, okay, I'm getting out of my 20s. I'm getting ready to go in my 30s. Are my party days over? Do I got to start thinking about kids? Do I got to start doing blah, 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 blah? Yep. But you're thinking of that, which is, I mean, that's you didn't care about all that other stuff. You're doing the mission.
We had a mission. Yeah, and that's what it was. It's easy to focus when you have a mission. Like, right. For me, especially, like, I'm working towards something. Mm-hmm. Like, there's this thing far off in the distance that I need to get to. So I can keep that focus, and I can do what's right in the moment to achieve that goal that's at the end.
Right. I think a lot of people don't have the goal. They don't think about the goals that they should have, or they don't think about a goal. And they have all these different things they want to go do, but they're not considered on the one goal. Because, you know, you can say, you know, from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to play guitar. From 8 to 9 o'clock, I'm going to become a gourmet chef and make awesome breakfast. And then from 9 to 10, I'm going to read, you know, books on stoicism so I can be better. And then from 10 to 11, I'm going to work out so I can be, you know, this whole, you know, you start trying to do that, you're going to do nothing. You're not going to do any one of those things. Yep. Because you look at Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was Jimi Hendrix because he spent all his time playing the guitar. Yep. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the 70s. Yep. That's all he did. He didn't have an hour that he would focus on that. You look at these great authors and these leaders and stuff. They don't do all these other things. They do the one thing that they're doing. They write all the time, or they speak all the time, or they work on their craft all the time.
Time management.
And so if you have your focus and your goals on all these different things, you're going to attain none of them, because you're going to have a hard time competing with all the other things you want to do. Yep. So as much as you want to do things, I mean, I'm not saying don't pick up a guitar if you want to, or in your case, you have that goal on being the leader for these people. But in the back of your head somewhere, you're still wanting to sing, I'm guessing. You still like to sing, or you like to do whatever.
Do that theater nerd stuff.
Right. You can't... Can you do the leader thing and go do theater and make sure you're at practices and work on your monologues and all that stuff? You can't do all those things at the same time. So some things are going to take precedent, and some things are going to take that priority. Yep. And it's huge just to sit there and break your life down that way. Like, okay, I guess maybe I'm not going to be the virtuoso guitar player that I always wanted to be, or I'm not going to be this great whatever thing I wanted to be. But I love this thing and I have passion for. I'm going to be this. And so you can focus on that. That's not going to take away anything else, but it's going to help you become who you are.
Exactly.
So you're going in, you're being the leader, helping the team get to where they need to go. Mm-hmm. And life is just easy and it's fun. And
life is easy in the military. And it is fun too. Like you know exactly what you need to do, when you need to do it, where to be, when to be there. Like it's very easy, and then it's done and you go back. Especially with National Guard, it's a little different than active duty, because active duty you still go to wherever post you're assigned and you still have that structure. Right. And then you go back home for National Guard and you're back home.
And you got to go have a regular job.
You have to have a regular job. Like, what am I going to do with my life? So, of course, I went back to the grocery store. It was easy. Right. But I also ended up going back to school. And I changed my major completely to criminal justice with a minor in military science. And I was doing ROTC to become an officer. And I worked super hard on that. And I ended up breaking my ankle several times in training, but still, like, I can power through this. And like, I didn't realize that I broke it until later on, but I heard it and I could tell. Right. And so you were rucking on it and doing all these field training exercises. And, you know, I was
It's all wrapped up, and it's got as many braces and splints and everything else, and trying to.
That was probably the busiest time of my life, but probably one of my favorite times in my life because I spent 3 years working full time at the grocery store, doing ROTC, which has a lot of stuff on the outside, plus going to school full time, and then doing my regular drill National Guard duties.
And so drill is, what is that? 2 weeks a month?
No,
or, I mean a week a month. Weekend a month. 2 weeks a year.
It's supposed to be a weekend a month and 2 weeks a year, but welcome to the National Guard. It's never what they say. And so sometimes, like, we have a drill coming up that's 5 days or 7 days, and then annual trainings, depending on where you are in the cycle. So we deploy every 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. We know we're going to go somewhere. We don't know where we're going, but we're going to go somewhere. And so if you're in a year that's ramping up to a deployment, your drills are longer, your annual training is longer, just to prep for that. And then, you get back and you do a reset year where everything's kind of normal. Your drills are the 1 day a week or the 1 weekend a month, and
right, a normal schedule.
A normal
per
schedule
se.
per
Right.
se.
It's funny because when I was in the Marines, drill for us is getting out on the parade deck and just marching and doing everything marching, because you've seen Marines where it's just everything's so crisp and well, I would say 50% of the time you are drilling in boot camp alone, right? So when I would talk to people that I knew from the National Guard, you guys would say, "Oh, I got drill this weekend."
No.
I mean, you guys spend the whole weekend just marching? That sucks. But
do we even remember how to march? No.
actually, me and another one of our officers, we had to go do a flag ceremony for a police officer who had passed away, or a retired police officer who passed away, and we did a flag ceremony for him earlier this week or last week, and we both were like on the left, we're like telling each other like that we both forgot, but no, we both know, right? And so we did it, and we were, our turns were pretty crisp and stuff like that, and like, oh, we look pretty good until we got to the flag part. We're like, oh no, because we should have practiced this a little bit more, and so we got it, and it did okay, and for what it was, but there's no way we were going to be Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, recruits or anything like that. Yeah. So I think he's too tall and I'm too short, so it is what it is. But aside from that, I've been listening to you guys say, "Well, I got drill." So when you say, "Oh, we got drill for 5 days," what do you do for 5 days? You just march? But obviously, drill, that just means what you're going to go do for training or whatever, right?
You go do your Army job for however long it is,
right?
Or sit around and wait for hours on end. That happens a lot too.
So that's the military life. The hurry up and wait.
That's the great thing about the military is you go in, you just get whatever needs to be done.
Right.
And then you just goof off for however long until it's time to do something else, and then you knock it out, and then you just hang out.
Right.
That's the normal pattern.
So you're doing drill. You're working at a grocery store, and at some point something changed. So things didn't maintain this, because I know you're still not working at a grocery store.
So what had happened was I met someone in the military. At the time, it was kind of like a cute little romantic story.
Right.
Because I ended up going out one drill. I went and drilled with one of the actual line infantry units, and we went out to, I don't know, the sticks somewhere in the snow. And I was the only female with this group, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, she'll never survive, whatever."
Oh, we're going to have to take care of her. She's going to drag her body and blah, blah, blah.
No. I was fine. I slept in the snow and peed outside and did all the stuff that they expect you to do. And apparently this one person saw me, and they're like, "Oh, that one, I like that one." And they ended up messaging me, and we went on a date. He asked me if I wanted to go hiking, and of course, I had the inklings of a dispatcher back then, and I was like, "Well, I don't know who the hell you are." So I, of course, checked the mugshot websites to make sure he wasn't arrested, or did a little background check as best as I could.
Because it's National Guard, and unfortunately, it could be just regular guy. He gets in trouble. He does whatever on his regular time.
Yep.
And leadership doesn't know about it yet, or whatever. So yeah.
Yep. So as far as I could tell, he was like a clean, normal human, and so we went on our date, and then we ended up dating for longer and got married, he was not what I expected. And, once you get into, he had a lot of issues. He blamed it on PTSD, went on a couple of deployments, but it was far more than whatever he had experienced. And it was just genuinely messed up in the head for other reasons. It wasn't from the deployment. He'd like to say that, but he was not a nice person. Yeah. And so this relationship was actually really bad for me. And the people that went through, one of our officers was in ROTC with me. I was supposed to graduate with him. And I did graduate college, but I did not complete ROTC. It's one of the biggest failures that I regret in my life, but I'm actually thankful too, because to be an officer in the Army, just don't want that. So it was kind of good at the end. But, I really struggled with that. I put on a lot of weight. This relationship was very emotionally abusive. And I think I hid it well for a while, but people in hindsight, they're like, no, we could see you like spiraling down. Yeah. I was not who I was. And eventually this is like jumping forward. We're going to have to go back, but I'll talk a little bit about this relationship. It became physical one time and one time only. Yeah. And I left. It was actually the night before I had to go to DPSST. Oh, okay. To go do my training for dispatching. And so that was a really hard time for me. And I had friends that like helped me when I got back, so I didn't have to go back into that situation. That's good. Yeah, that's good. It was. So I experienced a lot of professional failures throughout that relationship. And I've always been one that wants to fight for other people. It's very easy for me to fight for another person and to want to help them. And it wasn't one of those situations where like I wanted to fix him, I'm going to fix you. Right. I wanted to help him and, help him see his worth and see all the things that he could be, but you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And that was a real hard lesson for me in my life.
Yeah. So not to take it back or to downplay any of that, but let's go back to before that then. And you said, because we kind of jumped a little bit, but I want to, that development that made you decide, hey, I'm assuming you were married for the majority of this time between sleeping in the snow and then you become a dispatcher.
So we were together. Yeah, we were. We were still married when I became a dispatcher.
Right. And so this is just a huge growing period. And there's a couple years. Is that right?
Yeah, about 5.
Right. And so this is just, you said there's a lot of failures during this time in your life. Graduating school.
I did graduate, but I didn't commission as an officer, which was
And so that's something that you still kick yourself for?
I do a little bit. Like, professionally, I'm grateful. Like, I see my friends that did graduate and did commission, and they just hate their lives. But, being an officer, like, it doesn't necessarily fit my personality. I could do it. Sure. But I think in hindsight, it's better that I wasn't. But at the same time, like, I put that weight back on. I am an emotional eater. And I stopped caring for myself. And so those failures also included like regular promotions in the military. So even though I didn't commission, I was still enlisted. Right. But I didn't get those promotions. And so I was super far behind on all sorts of things. And I had an NCO, one of the greatest NCOs that I know. He was my platoon sergeant at the time. And he had known me since I joined, and he knew that I was not in a good place. Literally dragged me. Well, he tricked me and dragged me. He's like, hey, we need to go talk to this person. So he, like, drugged me down the hall in the Armory 1 drill. And he, like, throws me in this office with this guy. He's like, this is a behavioral health person. You need to talk to him. Okay, bye. And he, like, closed the door. I was like, you son of a... like, and then so I sat there, and the guy's like, so he told me a little bit about what's going on. I was like, I want you to know that I don't want to be here.
Well, good. Sit down anyways.
Yeah, pretty much. And then he asked me like 2 questions, and it was just word vomit. Yeah. And I ended up talking to him for quite a while. And then I got the name of one of our... And I had... there's a huge stigma with mental health and like talking to therapists. Right. And I had the belief that, like, I'm not going to talk to a therapist. That's ridiculous. Why do you want to talk to a feelings doctor?
Only crazy people talk
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I started talking to other people who were, like, senior enlisted that I respected, and they talked to therapists, and I got one of their names, one of the therapist's names. And I called her, and she was super open when we first talked on the phone, and she's like, hey, first of all, you can come in and talk to me. And if you feel like it's not a good fit, my feelings will not be hurt. Just tell me, and we will work on finding you someone else. And I was like, okay, that's cool. That's not what I expected.
It gives me out, but cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, also, I know how people are in the military. She's like, you can say whatever you want, however you want to say it. I was like, so I can cuss because I do that? She's like, I don't care. I was like, perfect. This is going to be a great fit. And so I went in there still begrudgingly, and I sat down with her. And again, I said, first of all, I don't want to be here.
Right.
But people told me that I should.
Right.
And I ended up talking to her. It took a little bit longer to, like, be really honest. Like, I would say things, but they're all just, like, surface emotions, not really, like, digging down deep into what the actual issues are.
Right.
And I was very protective at the time of, like, the marriage.
Yeah.
And the person that I was with, because we were still in the midst of maybe trying to fix things.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't going to work, but I had hopes.
You didn't know at the time.
Yeah, I had high hopes. And eventually I became honest about what was actually happening in that relationship with her, and saying those things out loud, going, okay, if this was one of my friends in that situation, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Why are you still there?
Right.
And so I had to gain a little respect for myself and be like, this is not you.
Right. You know, and that's funny. You know, people don't see their own issues. They don't see, because they're so close to it. Mm-hmm. And the minute you get that out there, and people always say, oh, you got to get this off your chest. Why do I need to talk about it? Talking about it gets it out there. Mm-hmm. You get it out there, you start hearing your own words. Mm-hmm. And the same thing you would have said to somebody else about, you can't do this, you're better than that, blah, blah, blah. You start hearing yourself, and you're like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be better than this, because this little girl, this little Susie, to put her hands on her hips, is expecting you to be something more.
Absolutely.
And so, and that's, you know, that's a lot of times what we think about. And, you know, I went through a super dark time just not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and, you know, that I didn't realize who I was and what I was doing. And you have to start looking at who, you know, people have an expectation of who we are or what we're supposed to be. But what's that expectation that we have of ourselves?
Yep.
And not just right now. Who do I expect to myself to be? And I got to go out the door right now and become that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about years ago. What did that little kid that used to look in the mirror and you know, make funny faces at yourself, what does that person think of you now?
Yeah.
You know? And we don't do that enough. And I think what you're saying is when you were talking to this lady, you started seeing that.
Yep.
Like, this is bullcrap. I'm not going to sit back and become nothing. I'm not going to be this thing that I didn't expect myself to be. Mm-hmm. So.
And I mentioned earlier, you know, I always want to fight for other people. But I have always had a hard time fighting for myself, which is the one person that I need to stand up for. Right,
right. And, you know, we don't stand up for ourselves enough. But on the other hand, we're our worst critic, too. Mm-hmm. We just let ourselves beat ourselves down. So I read this thing one time where the guy said, he goes, if you can't, you have to talk to yourself as if you're in a relationship. Would you talk to that other person in your relationship that way? Or would you let somebody else talk to that person that way? Yep. And if that's no, then you can't let people talk to you that way, and you can't treat yourself that way.
Yes.
So it's huge.
And that right there is very important, and it takes practice. That's not something you can change overnight. The way my feelings doctor, as I like to call them, put it, she's like, you know, your brain is like a forest, and in the forest you have like a little creek, and the water's running through it. Mm-hmm. And then more water runs through it, and it gets deeper, and it becomes a river, right? So it's just easier to flow. It's easier access for that water to go. Your thoughts are the same way. Right. And so the more you think these negative thoughts about yourself, and you tell yourself these negative things, that's just the easiest route for your brain to go. Yeah. And so you literally have to build and reroute your thoughts, and it takes practice, and you have to stop and take that moment and have that conversation with yourself of, I'm not going to talk to myself. Stop saying those things about myself, you know.
Right.
And then counteract it with a positive things.
Mm-hmm. You know, and we spend all this time, as humans, focusing on negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's the news or politics or some stupid stuff, right? And we focus on these negative things, and then what does that turn us into? Cynical jerks and mean people, or you know, whatever it is that it might turn us into.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes years for us to get that way. And like you said, this route that this river is taking is it's easier because that's what you're always doing. And if you're always doing something, you become comfortable with it, and that's what you're used to doing. There's people that are comfortable living in squalor. There's people comfortable living in, you know, in drugged lives or whatever.
Yep.
And they don't realize that there's other things. There's another path in the world. But if you focus on working towards the good things, and as hard as it is, getting up in the morning, working out, getting a routine, making sure that you're going to, you know, eat a little bit better and helping people, doing all these things, it might be difficult as you start out because it's not something you're used to doing.
Mm-hmm. Or
giving encouragement to people. You're not used to doing that. But as you go and do it more often, it becomes so much easier. And just like working out, you want to work out, how do you get stronger? You start doing it. It's hard at first. And then it starts getting easy if you use the same weight.
Yep.
Then in order for it to make it hard again, you got to put heavier weight on there.
Yep.
And so that's the idea. You got to make things harder, and then they become easier.
Yep.
And then you can become better.
And you have to realize that, you know, if you're not used to being that person that's, you know, more positive, or even the little things like working out. You're not a person that works out. That's how the people on the outside have seen you.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have feedback from them, and they're going to be like, oh, well, that's not going to last long or whatever. And you have to be able to shut those things out of your head. Like,
right.
Don't listen to them.
That negative self-talk and the negative external talk.
Yes.
And that's the part of the thing where you don't care what people think about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's why you got to have that line somewhere.
Exactly. So you're going to these air quotes head shrinkers, and you're talking to them. You're getting this whole thing out, and so you start realizing self-worth. I'm guessing.
Yes. And
you start putting yourself first.
Yes. So, and it was not a quick process at all. It's so I was working in dispatch, and I am extremely thankful for having that job at the time.
Yeah.
And still now, like, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for that job, but that kept me focused on something.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of dark days, and I think without certain people, there's a friend that I have at work, without her and that NCO that, like, drugged me in to go talk to the feelings doctor, I probably wouldn't be here today. Like, I was in a really, really bad place.
Right.
And so I focused on the little things. I started changing my thought process to find that self-worth that I needed. Mm-hmm. And I started listening. I listen to podcasts all the time. And a lot of the times the people that are super successful, what they say is you focus on gratitude.
Yeah.
And so I started listening 3 things every day that I was thankful for. And sometimes, like, even on bad days, like, I would do it. And sometimes it would be simple things like, I have a job. I have a car that gets me to that job, and I have a house to go home to. Like, I am grateful for those things.
Right. Right.
And so with that and, like, showing gratitude, I started finding my self-worth a little bit more, and I separated myself from that marriage and that situation. The further I got away from that, the more I started to become myself again.
Right.
And people around me noticed it. You know, I had one of our coworkers who said, you know, you used to be really angry, which I didn't think I was angry. And I wasn't angry. It was just the way that I show my emotions are either really happy or really angry. I have a serious case of RBF. Like, it's so people mistake, like, my sadness or, you know, my pain for anger, which is understandable. Right.
Because that's what you knew. And I think and I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to diagnose you here.
Do it.
This is World According to Ken. You have that little girl that was always in charge, that was bossy, right? You can't, you're going to go become who you are, and everybody and you still have that bossy mentality, and you have to show everybody that I'm a boss. I'm the boss around here. Because there's still a little bit of that little girl that just comes out every once in a while. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
where you're bossy.
Oh, okay.
And so you can't be seen as weak, and nobody wants to be seen as weak, and unfortunately, that's a lot of where we get who we are. Where I don't want to be seen a certain way, so I'm going to put this forward. And so when you become, you say I don't want to be weak, and so now I have to be. How do you not be weak? You be tough.
Yep.
And how do you be tough? You show everybody that you don't put up with crap. And so that's where the RBF comes from, or whatever, right? And as much as we want to do that, and much as we want to, and this is, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, what happened with me, like I said a while back, it was super dark times. I had to realize that ego had to go. My ego and my any arrogance that I may have had to get just gone. Because at no point, the first thing that needs to go when you want to get into leadership, or you want to be better, or you want to be more,
yes,
the first thing has to go is the ego.
Yes.
Which is totally weird, because we have to. We're talking about wanting to better ourselves, and you got to think of yourself, and you got to give yourself self-worth. The thing that has to go away is the ego.
Yep.
And you take that ego out, you have so much more room to blossom and grow. It's like pruning a rose bush.
Yes.
You can't just let it grow wild.
Yep.
You do it just right, and those things will come out and flourish. So
absolutely.
But, so you're working at a grocery store. You're I'm gonna go back just a little bit. Working at a grocery store. You're in the guard. You're going through some rough times. And what, you saw a thing in the newspaper saying dispatchers wanted, or?
Yeah, kind of. Like, my sister was a dispatcher for one of our adjoining counties years ago. And I was like, oh, I could probably do that. And I talked to her a little bit about it. She's like, apply, you could do that.
Well, being that you did communications, you know all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah,
and I put that on there. It's a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, you still talk on a radio.
They call you comms. Right?
Comms. So yeah, I saw the posting. I was looking for some sort of job, and I put in my application. It's a long process, and I ended up getting that job. I still don't know how I passed that psych eval, but they said I did. I had actually, so it's funny, when I went in for that psych eval,
a couple $100 poor, but
right?
Whatever.
Whatever, it's fine. Totally worth it. When I went in for that psych eval, I had, a couple years, actually several years before, like early 20s, I was still working at that grocery store, but I had applied to be a sheriff's deputy for one of the adjoining counties. And I made it through all the steps except for that background check, that psych eval. I didn't pass it. And, at the time that was like really upsetting, but I was young and obviously not making the best choices.
Right.
And so that's why I didn't do it. And when I went in for the psych eval for dispatch, it turned out it was the same guy. And he's like, "Oh, I remember you. You sat with one of your feet." So I sat like cross-legged on the chair, not crisscross, but one foot was up. And he's like, "I remember you." And I was like, "Oh, great." That's fine. Yeah. And so we went through and we talked a little bit of like what I went and did for the last few years, and apparently I grew as a person, so that was good. And I passed with flying colors, I guess. It was a very different experience that time than it was the first time.
Yeah, which is weird, because you were saying that you were going through, pretty much ending your marriage then at this point, right?
I was in the midst of. I wasn't going through ending it yet. The ending of the marriage started after I started working. But I was in the midst of a pretty emotionally abusive relationship at that time.
Right. And I mean, you had to see some writing on the wall at some point that this can't keep going. Something has to change.
Yes.
Because this can't keep going on this way. So you mentioned that there was a point when it got physical. And then was that when you told yourself, I'm not doing this anymore?
I'd like to say, yeah, I took the stance and blah, blah. But I ended up going to the academy, like I said, for training.
Right.
which was great because I didn't have to go to work. And we had so that night he was extremely intoxicated. A lot of things were coming to a head. He was downstairs, I was upstairs, and then his phone was going off. And I went and took his phone down to him, and he got mad at me because he thought I read his phone. And he came upstairs and he kicked the door down. Uh-huh. And he came in and started yelling at me. And then this is going to get a little...
Say what you want.
Okay. He came in and started arguing with me. And then before I knew it, he was on top of me, choking me.
Yeah.
And, you have that fight or flight. You're supposed to. And normally I'm a fighter. But at that time, with where I was emotionally, I was like, just do it. I didn't care. And I didn't fight. I was just going to let it happen. And then eventually he stopped. And I was just frozen. And I laid there. And then he tried to apologize and all this other stuff. And, I didn't sleep that night. But I got all my stuff ready. And I was like, I have a mission to do, which was go to academy to do my training. And I put makeup around my neck. And, I went to academy and I knocked that out. And I got home and I knew that things had to change. So we separated. Mm-hmm. And I said, you have got to get help. But in the long run, he wasn't going to get help. He wasn't going to change anything. So I was the one that said, we're going to end this. And of course, and it was one of those situations where he wasn't going to do it, whether he wanted to or not. He was going to make me be the one that says, we're going to get a divorce. Right. And I had to come to terms with that.
Right.
So.
And sometimes, I think that's the stronger, because you don't want to pull that Band-Aid off. You don't want to tear out that thing that's been there for 5 years, like you said, right? And now we got to call it, we're done.
Well, and it was a tough realization to figure out that he was not the person that I believed that he could be, the person that he thought or said that he could be in the beginning, that he just didn't want to become. Right. And he had a victim mentality, through all of that, nothing was his fault. This isn't my fault. It's everybody else's fault around me. And I was like, I can't fix that. Right.
And I guess that's kind of we're young. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. And you're also looking at things through rose-colored glasses or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's a point though where you don't think that it's your fault, and we don't want to admit that that I have anything to be blamed about. But once again, we go back to, we have to lose our ego. Mm-hmm. And the younger we can learn that, the better it is. But the majority of the time, we don't learn it till we're in the throes of whatever it is we're doing, and we're like, oh,
we're gonna learn this the hard. That's how I've been all my life. Let's learn it the hard way. Okay.
Yeah. So you come back from the academy, which is not very long, but you get to stay up. You get to stay at the academy and sleep there overnight, and it's a dorm sort of situation and stuff. Yep. And you learned everything you needed to know, and it came back and said, this is mine, and get off my console. And
yeah, this is my console.
That's right. But you became a dispatcher, and you've been doing that now 5 years,
right? And a little less, yeah.
And is it the job that you always thought it was, based off what your sister told you, or what you?
It is. I love the job. The actual job of dispatching, I think, is great fun. It's like a puzzle that you're putting together all the time, especially on those busy days.
Right.
And 911 calls, I enjoy most of the time. Sometimes they get to you. Back before, when I kept saying I was dead inside, I wouldn't let things get to me.
You're totally detached. Huh?
Yeah, and then I went to the feelings doctor, and here I am, totally attached to life and blah, blah, blah.
Which now you have to detach when you get somebody that's saying,
So in the moment, absolutely. You get those calls of the ones that really get to me are the suicide calls, because I had a friend who killed herself, and in that moment, you can't emotionally react. You show empathy, absolutely, 100%, but you can't get overwhelmed with emotion. You have to help them as best as you can.
Right. You have time for emotion when it's over.
Absolutely.
So you go through this stuff, and you, you said you've developed some solid friendships. Were they friends before?
Mm-mm.
And just over the last couple of years, you're like, these are the people that I need to have in my life. Mm-hmm. And they're good folks, and they help you get through the things that you need to get through.
Yes.
You know, those hard calls or the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the same people, because there's still a little bit of the 20s Susie who needs to go out and get a drink every once in a while, or I would assume.
I don't drink that often, but yeah, you know, I found other ways to like work off emotions or whatever it is.
So what is that? What was one of the things you de-stress with?
Right now it's working out, like lifting heavy things. That's my go-to. I used to be super insecure because even without like extra weight on, I'm a bigger person. Uh-huh. Like we're not small in my family. My sister's 6'2", I'm 5'10". Like we're tall people. We're broad people.
Yeah. Well, your dad's a former pro football player.
Yeah.
Well, he was your stepdad.
He's my stepdad, but I look more like him than anybody else.
That's so funny, huh?
And like I said, I'm built for strength. Like I can lift, especially for a female. I can lift a lot.
Right. Yeah. What's cool is we have a workout area in our office. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not in the middle of the office. It's a room dedicated for it, and you can walk by. And it could be any time of the day. I've seen, because we have to do a sign-in sheet, and I see that you're in there at 2 in the morning. Sometimes you're in there at 10 in the morning. Sometimes it's 3 in the afternoon. But whenever I walk by and I see you in there, you're heaving giant weight for deadlifts. Mm-hmm. You're doing deadlifts. You're doing
deadlifts.
Kettlebells. You're doing. We were talking the other day about a workout program, and we were talking about man makers. Mm-hmm. And those are a beast.
They are. But
whatever the case is, you're working to get to that point, and we also had that same conversation that man, how come I can't get to where I want to be, and I work my butt off, and yet I still am not getting to where I want to be. More or less, we're probably dealing with a lot of stress because of our chosen career fields, but then that. It may be the fact that we're not becoming bodybuilders and chiseled and all that stuff that you might see on magazines or TV or whatever. But you're also being healthy mentally. You're getting a lot of that crap out.
Yep.
And so
it's very important.
And so that's a regular routine of yours.
Yeah. So I had to find something that was more positive and conducive to my lifestyle to work through whatever it is. And also so one of the things that I started doing was working on the things that I'm not good at or I didn't believe that I could do. And so like 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't do a man maker to save my life. Right.
So for some people, they hear us say, what is a man maker? So what is a man maker?
You have a dumbbell in each hand, and it's essentially kind of like a burpee, except for you add a row with each arm when you're down in the push-up position. And then you jump back up, and then you thrust the dumbbells up, and then you just keep doing that.
So burpees with weights.
Yeah, essentially, with a little extra movement in there.
Yeah. See, and it's, they will gas you out so fast. On that third one, you're like, I got to do 20 of these. And you're like, I can't do it on 3.
Sometimes I'll be in the midst, and I'll go down, and I'll push down, and then I just kind of lay there. Like, okay, I got to get back up now.
Yeah. So, but you're right. You keep that mindset that I've got to go and I've got to keep going. Because if you don't keep going, what happens? What happens for you if you decide, you know what, I'm just going to stop. I'm going to not.
Emotionally, I become a hot mess. Like I have found that if I'm not working out consistently, my emotions are out of control. And I don't mean like I'm going crazy or whatever, but like internally, I don't feel, I don't know, stable's not the right word, but I just feel like I'm a little off kilter and not okay. Right. And I don't like feeling not okay.
Right.
And then I get into bad habits that I had for years of like watching Netflix for hours on end. And, every once in a while I'll give myself a couple of days where I just like chill out, because sometimes you do need that too. Like shut your brain off and watch Netflix and watch Disney Plus and Mandalorian for hours or whatever it is.
Sure.
Like, You do need that, and it's about finding balance between doing that and treating yourself, or putting in that work.
Right.
And I'm more successful when I put the work in more often, as opposed to just like letting myself relax.
Right. And so you're a dispatcher. You work out. You do other things. You spend time with friends and family, and enjoy your life generally. Mm-hmm. Right. Obviously, there's things you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I didn't have to do that. But
yeah,
the mission is what the mission is. So.
Yeah.
But you kind of got kind of a hiccup in your normal routine and normal schedule back in 2020. Mm-hmm. And that was
my deployment.
You just got back within a couple months.
So we left in 2019, at the end of 2019, and we got back near the end of 2020. And
that was longer than it was supposed to be, right?
It was, COVID and other things that were happening in our own home country that affected what we were doing overseas. And
right.
It was probably one of my favorite times of my life, though. It was a lot of fun
going overseas and being where you were.
I mean, it was still like normal Army BS that you're just like, oh, we have to do this, or stand around for hours, or whatever the Army malarkey is that you're dealing with for the day.
Right.
But it's just so easy. And I met some wonderful, I deployed with one of my best friends, which was awesome. Uh-huh. She was in my battalion, and we actually in my company, we all worked really closely. And I met some other people there that will be friends for life that I wasn't expecting. And
right. And that's a cool thing, is that you go do something, and then you're friends with somebody and don't realize that you'll be friends with them forever. Mm-hmm. And you think, oh, look at this idiot or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you get to know them, like, oh my gosh.
You're my favorite idiot.
You're like a mirror of me.
Yeah.
We're both idiots. That's cool. So, and that's awesome, And did you, obviously you said you got to do the boring, but there's
always boring things.
But you said you're attached to an infantry battalion, right?
Yeah, so I'm part of an infantry battalion, and they got rid of the whole females can't be infantry anymore. But commo, we are part of every company ever, because everybody needs communications.
Everybody needs to talk to everybody, yeah.
Yep, but I was my company is the headquarters company for our battalion, and that's where, so instead of having your platoons, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th platoon of everybody of the same job, headquarters company has your HR section, your supply section, your commo section. So we had all sorts of different people, and there were a lot of moving parts. Right. And when I was over there, I was in charge of the equipment for the mission. Mm-hmm. So we had several different missions all over the continent. We were dispersed everywhere. And I was in charge of maintaining and tracking all of the communications equipment that was out for all of these various missions.
Right.
I got really good at Excel, keeping track of everything. And, I got to actually physically work on the radios to try and fix those. And that was a lot of fun. And we got to use equipment that I'd never used before, which was also a lot of fun and annoying because it kept breaking, but... that's normal. It's Army crap. Yeah. So, that's just normal.
Yeah, lowest bidder.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're there. So you're a dispatcher who's in the National Guard, who has to put her job and her life on hold to go overseas, to go be deployed. Mm-hmm. We've talked to a number of people who are vets, that've done stuff, and it's all, I was deployed, I did that. But you are still doing that. You just got back a couple months ago from this deployment and jumped right back into being a dispatcher and being a supervisor in the dispatch, right? But at the same time, while you were deployed, you did something else. You told me just the other day. Did you sign something?
My extension?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was like, wait, what did I do?
What did I do? What did I say?
Oh, no. I extended for... a couple more years. I at this point, I'll stay in until retirement, but I'm kind of working the system with this particular extension. Uh-huh. After you're in for a certain number of years, you don't get bonuses anymore. Oh, so I'll be at 12 years. It's 13 years that you don't get bonuses anymore.
Right.
So at the end of this extension, I'll be in for 12 years, get that last bonus. And also I can change my job in the Army if I want to,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, I'm considering it. So we'll just see where
you want to go
where
special
the
forces?
tide takes me.
Right.
No.
Oh,
No.
I thought it was a given. Okay, never mind. So you re-up. And now you said you're gonna ride this out till you retire.
Yeah. I'm halfway done. I might as well finish it.
Right. And so what is retirement for the National Guard? Because for the active Army, it's like 20 years, right?
Yeah, it's 20 years.
So still the same thing.
Yeah.
So here's a couple things. It's kind of weird. It is not normal, but it's cool, right? You're a grocery store worker who quits being a grocery store and goes in, well, not quits, but goes into the National Guard in an infantry unit, meets her husband who gets an abusive relationship, the whole time still doing the National Guard thing, becomes a dispatcher, still in the National Guard, finds herself, and then goes back to being able to say, you know what, I'm going to do this until I can't do it anymore, until they say you're not allowed to, because I'm finding a lot of self-worth in this.
And I love it. Like, it's my other family.
Right.
It makes me laugh. We have one of our dispatchers, her husband deployed with me. He's in my section. Like, we're the same job. And I've known him for years. And I can't, right now with the promotion that's coming up, I might get sent off to a different unit, and I'm struggling with that because I've been with these people for so long.
Right.
They're like my little family. They call me Dad instead of Mom. Now I'm Dad. It starts with a joke that one of the kids, he was adopted, and he would always make a joke. Oh, I don't have a dad, and so he ended up just calling me Dad. I was like, I'm your stepdad. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Like, so now everybody calls me Dad, and our platoon sergeant, who's definitely a dude. Right. He's Mom. And the new kid, I told them, I was like, I'm Dad, he's Mom. He's like, I'm going to get that confused. I was like, that's sexist. How dare you?
Yeah. What's your problem? And that's funny. You call them kids because they're all these 20-year-olds, 18, 19-year-old kids that are coming in. And
a lot of them are, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I get it. So, and that's pretty cool.
And you got to rein them in. They're just a
hot mess.
Bunch of boys that like to cause a ruckus. Like, I'm the only female in that section. I was like, you guys and your shenanigans.
Yeah.
And they come up with the weirdest ideas to do anything ever. Like, the most complicated ideas to finish one task. I was like, rein it in. Come back here.
Let's do. See this little part? We can get it all done with this little part. And there's all these other things.
And they're messy, too. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, that's what the military's there for. There's people that go in that's how they learn life. So there's got to be people like you to do that. There's got to be people that have been in long enough or have life experience that they can say, hey, do this, do it that way. This is easier.
Yeah.
Because they don't know. And so
yes,
at least they're open to understanding and wanting to learn and to do it right and do it better. Because there's people that don't want to do that. They don't want to learn. They think they've got it all under control, and they don't think that there's any other way to do something.
Which goes back to my whole thing of being a good leader. Right. You have to have that humility to be like, oh, absolutely. Okay, I don't have it all figured out.
Right. Lose that ego.
Yep.
So, so I guess that brings us up to our current, where we're at in your life. What are your plans? I mean, you obviously you want to retire out of
the
guard, but you want to. I remember, to be honest with you, we had a conversation one time, and I was talking about. I know a kid who went to New York City, and she went to a musical theater school, and she graduated musical theater school, and her dream is to be on Broadway and all this different stuff. And you're like, oh, I totally want. And I saw that.
Long time.
I saw that little glimmer in your eye that you're like, oh, that's what I want to do. I mean, but you're like, oh, that is cool, and then you start asking more questions. And so I noticed when you start asking more questions about it, obviously you have more an interest in it. And so I told you, well, shoot, man, there was people in her class that were 30-something years old and going through the class, and you're like, anybody can do that? Do I do that? Obviously, right now, Broadway's closed.
Yeah.
All this different COVID stuff that we're going through still. And those, if you're listening to this sometime in the future, cool. Just remember back in 2020, 2021,
COVID.
when everybody was shut down, we couldn't do anything. So that's where we're at. And it's just, if you could have that dream, that's where you would go, huh?
So I'd like to combine like all of my worlds, doing all these different things and going through what I've gone through. Has given me the best and worst of all these realms and worlds, I guess. And I like helping people. I really do. Now that I've gotten over my hatred of therapy and feelings doctor crap, I want to go, I don't know, I want to combine everything, you know, work with people, maybe become a feelings doctor, but also include like that theater aspect. I think that there's a lot to be said for people who go through experiences, but they don't get to confront someone or say how they truly feel. Right. And, you know, if you add in that theater aspect, people get to work their emotions out via monologues or plays or whatever it is. Star Wars, Adam Driver, he was a Marine. Right, yeah. And he went into theater, and they started doing that. That's why they had that theater group that he started, or that he was part of, you know, to work through some of the things that they went through. And so I think coming up with some sort of a therapy where you could combine the theater aside, like, you know, maybe you could write a monologue of what you would say to whatever person and how it affected you. Right. And then say it out loud. I think saying it out loud is probably the most important aspect of therapy for anyone. Absolutely. And then also, you know, I got more so into fitness and working out and how that affects you emotionally and mentally, you know, combining those worlds, you know, the physical aspect, but also working through your feelings, because a lot of people, and I myself have experienced it where, yeah, I'm working out and, you know, I'm on this diet, but I don't have that mental and emotional maturity to realize, okay, I shouldn't be eating just 800 calories a day. Right.
Or on the other side is, you can sneak a cupcake here, or you can sneak a cup or
eat my pint of Ben and Jerry's, and like, you know, finding that mental and emotional aptitude in order to create this moderation and like being healthy with food. I think today's society, a lot of people have a hard time with just food and moderation and making those good choices for yourself. Because
it's all right there. It's all easy to get to. And they bring donuts into the office, and they do. And I'm a terrible, you know, sucker to that.
Somebody love snacks. Like they're
like,
great.
Oh my gosh, Christmas time. It's just tables and tables
I
of
gave
cookies.
Up this last Christmas. I was like,
it's terrible. But that's just the idea, is that where do we control that? How do we control that? And we've got to have self-discipline.
And then also not going too far on the other spectrum. You know, you have the people that, you know, we see it a lot in dispatch, because, you know, you're sitting there for hours on end. You're not active
in the same room.
And it's very easy to put weight on if you're not watching your food. And so people go on these crash diets of, well, I'm not going to eat carbs, or I'm going paleo, or I'm going to try intermittent fasting. But they don't realize, I had this conversation the other day with someone who's like, well, I'm going to do intermittent fasting. I've started it. And I was like, okay, well, what are your fasting hours? Well, I just don't eat until I'm hungry. I was like, that's not intermittent fasting. That's just, or they're like, I just don't eat from whatever on this day, but then on this day I eat whatever I want, whenever I want. I was like, again, you have to have that routine. The point in intermittent fasting is like having that schedule so your body acclimates to it. Otherwise, it's just another form of an eating disorder.
Yeah, you're giving yourself that window that you can not eat, and then you can only eat in this 8-hour period or whatever, depending on whatever version you're wanting to go for, the ratio you're looking for. And then, but then during that window that you're eating, you're not piling on cakes and pints of Ben and Jerry's, and you're not putting these donuts in you're eating good food.
Yeah, quality food.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't have a treat here and there. Like, you can eat your fucking cookie. Like, it's fine. It's not going to ruin everything that you've worked through.
Right.
But you gotta, you know, you can't punish yourself because you did eat that pint of Ben and Jerry's that other day. Right. And just not eat for 2 days. That's not.
But then I guess on the other side, you got to think, okay, is that Ben and Jerry's, was that an award or reward for something? Did you do something well? Did you hold yourself for a week and a half or 2 weeks and do right and eat well? Man, reward yourself.
Yep.
Give yourself, enjoy because life's meant to be enjoyed. There's so many good foods out there that we can eat, and then all of a sudden you can't have any of it.
Right.
And you see these commercials, or you see the billboards, you whatever. I mean, who
doesn't
does
matter.
not
You're
like...
on social media, you see it all the time.
Yeah. So, but and that's awesome that you want to put all those things together, and you want to see if there's some way that you can make all those things happen. All in the same thing. Like we said before, you can't be a guitar player and be all these virtuosos.
Yep.
Expect, and practice a little bit each time, and then expect I can be everything. Focus on the one thing, but if you can put all those things together and put all those things into one goal, you might be able to, tackle what it is that you wanted to tackle. So,
yeah, and I think that, having those different ideas would be helpful, because one form of therapy may be helpful for someone, but it's not going to work for someone else, and it all depends on whatever it is that you're struggling or working through.
Right.
And, I think that having a variety of different ways to work through something might open up someone else's eyes and get rid of that stigma and those negative thoughts about therapy. It doesn't just have to be me going in to talk to someone and them telling me what I should do. That's not how that works, and that's not beneficial.
So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Where you were talking about, serving people, and that's what you just want to do. You want to help people and do all this different stuff. Where's that come from?
I think my parents. That's kind of they both worked in the school system for years, and even just growing up, I saw them just helping the people around them. You work to make your little corner of the world better, and that's kind of how I grew up. That's how my whole family is. We're a big Irish family, lots of people, but we all do the same thing.
Right.
And for me, it's a little bit selfish too, because I feel better when I'm helping someone else, and I feel like myself when I'm helping other people. If I'm not doing that, it's far easier to fall into all the negative things in life and focus on those, and then I don't feel like myself anymore, and I'm not happy. Right.
It's funny because when you talked about that just now, I was thinking what you said earlier, where you talked about the people started noticing that you were not your normal self, and they wanted you to get. And basically, they were doing things, dragging you down the hallway, taking you to the head shrinker, counselor, whatever. They're talking to you. They're saying this is not the normal you, and they're saying these things because they like who you are, who the real you is. And so I think a lot of times we get too involved with, I want to be this person, I want to show these people who I am, and it's not who you are. Yes. And I remember, and I don't know if this is how it was for girls, but I know as a guy growing up in school and all these different things, you have a crush on a girl or something, and you would bring it up, and then you go talk to your, I remember talking to my uncle, and I'd say, there's this girl and blah, 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 and he's like, well, just be yourself. Okay. I don't know how to do that because, there's a portion where you don't know who you are, especially if you've been spending all this time trying to be somebody else and prove to everybody that you're this other person. But people want us to be us. You got to be you, and people are going to accept you as you are and who you are, not based off of this weird persona that you try to make yourself out to be. So the more realistic you are, people are gonna, and we can see, people can see through it.
I think even if you don't get along with a particular person, your views might be different, whatever it is, or sometimes personalities just clash. Right. The more genuine a person is, though, the easier it is to accept them. Yeah, we're not gonna hang out and go get coffee or whatever. Right. But I accept you for who you are, and I like you for who you are because you're a genuine human being. Right.
You're going to like people that are genuine way more than you like the fakers. And you're going to like those people that are, trying to impress. And just stop. And, we learned it as kids and stuff like that. The guys that I know did, that you never got the girl being something else. Yep. And the girls were not interested in that. And then the other side of it, when you start growing up and you start trying to be whatever, like I was talking about a couple of podcasts ago, you go to an interview and you put this person in front, like, this and that, and then you get into the job and you can't do it. And you even mentioned it earlier today. You can't do it because you interview really well, but you're a hot mess. You can't do what you say you can do, or you can't do it as well, or you're just really good at sitting down, but when it comes time to actually putting the rubber to the road, you're a different story.
Yep.
Just be who you are, and people are going to see it.
Yep.
And if they don't see it, maybe you haven't had the opportunity to show them, and you're really, you don't put yourself forward out there enough, or they're not looking for it. They're not looking for that, what you're offering. And I guess if that's the case,
that's
so
just
be
life.
it.
Not everyone's going to like you, and I think that's really hard for people to accept. It was hard to accept for me for a long time when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Not everybody does have to like you.
Right.
What do they say? What someone else thinks about you is none of your business.
Right.
And I live by that. You know what? If you don't like me, okay.
Right. I heard a guy. He once said, he goes, talking about complaining, and he says, you can complain, but you can complain, but no one's going to listen to you, right?
Yep.
The other thing was, you can complain, about 80% aren't going to listen to you. About 80% don't care. Mm-hmm. And the other 20%, they're glad it's you. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to themselves, so they don't have to deal with that crap that you're dealing with. And so, that's another way of saying it sucks to suck.
Yep. I say that all the time. That's my favorite. Sucks to suck.
It sucks to be you, or whatever, however you use it. The idea is just be you, and just be who you are, and people are going to like you or they're not going to like you. And the ones that do like you, they're worth having in your life.
Yep.
And they're worth helping you develop those paths that become you and become good and that you're going to enjoy. If you spend all the time trying to impress people or being with other people that you don't like or don't want to have anything to do with you, it's not going to be fun. Life's not going to be enjoyable.
Absolutely.
So, if you could, and I like to ask this of everybody, but if you had the opportunity and it's all said and done, life is over for you, and you have 2 minutes to come back and do whatever you want, say whatever you wanted to say, go back to people and maybe right or wrong, or explain to somebody what they meant to you, or anything along those lines. If you can go back and you had 2 minutes of your time to say whatever you wanted to say, what would you say? Who would you say it to?
Well, first off, something probably smart ass to lead off with, because that's just who I am. Or surprise, motherfucker, here I am. Just to screw with them. Yep. But then, I think, and I try to do it, now, is show gratitude. Yeah. And be verbal about how grateful I am for the people that I have in my life. Yeah. And so a lot of times I fail because I forget, you get caught up in life and everything. But every once in a while, I make sure to say, I thank you for just being there. I want you to know that I am grateful for your support. I have a best friend. I've been best friends with her since 4th grade. Yeah. It's one of those friendships where you don't talk for a long time, and then you catch up in an hour and you're... Yeah, right. As soon as you get back, you're right back to where you were. And so, I would go to her and just be grateful for the years of friendship that we have and supporting me through all sorts of things. There's a list of people. I can't go through them all. We talked about a couple of them today. I think just having a genuine conversation. And I think also if they have something that they want to ask me or say to me, giving them that time to do the same. Yeah. Yeah. I think we don't think about those people in our lives that made such a difference, that we have to let them know that we have enjoyed them in our lives, that it was an absolute blessing that they were a part of our life and that they let us in and be part of theirs. And there's people that we don't even know that have that thought of us. We don't know that they think that of us. And if we would say that more often, we'd be encouraging other people, we'd be motivating other people to be better and do more, but being more real to each other, and
And that's what I think a lot of people miss.
Absolutely.
So, well, it's kind of got heavy for a second, and we're going to kind of lighten it up a little bit. Like I talked with some people about getting to that point where we can, how do we find out more about you? And you're not one of the people that wants everybody to know about them, and that's fine, and I think it's perfect. But so I'm not going to ask about your social media handles and all that stuff like that. You have a life you want to live, and you've got to go.
Just for memes, anyway.
It's
all for the memes.
And it's yeah. So, as far as the What's a Hero podcast is concerned, you can find us on Instagram, and you can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, and we're at What's a Hero. And then you can get a hold of us on our website at thewhatsaheropodcast.buzzsprout.com. And you can email me there, or you can email me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. You can instant message me on there if you have questions, you have thoughts. And I think this has been a really fun conversation, and I wouldn't mind having Susie come back at some point, and we could see where she's at, see if she's got her workout and drama and weightlifting
therapy
gig going, and she's got her own boot camp on that going on. But
that would be fun.
But we can bring her back, and you know what? At some point we can just get into the where people are at, and it's fun to know that. So at some point maybe we'll have you come on back, and we'll see where you're at. And
I do want to caveat, I don't want to give my social media stuff out, but if people do listen and they have more questions about therapy, there's a reason why I'm open about the things that I was open with, whether it got heavy or not.
Right.
People are going through things that you don't know. So if someone has questions about some of the stuff that I went through, or how I dealt with certain things, or
or where they can go for their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do they loosen up?
They can contact me through you. You have your email, and I would be happy to do that, and I'd be happy to talk more about it. It's something that I'm passionate about. I figure if I can get through some of the biggest shitstorms of life, I would love to help other people do the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you get a hold of me, and we can ask those questions. We can get those questions answered, and if nothing else, I can ask her, and I can bring it back in a future podcast, and we can go down that rabbit hole. And but if you're struggling and your self-care is not where it should be, and you don't think that, I was calling them head shrinkers, and we said therapy's for crazy people. It's not. It's therapy's for people, plain and simple.
Yep.
Everybody you need to get it off your chest, and you need to get that out in the open. And if you need to talk about life, talk about it. Don't just bottle it up, because it's eventually gonna, like soda pop, it's gonna blow its top.
Some way. Yep.
So do you have anything you would like to add to kind of close it out? Other than obviously you want to get a hold of you, but
I think that, this is the Hero podcast, and I don't think of myself as a hero, but I think anybody can be a hero. And a lot of that has to do with doing what's right. They say do what's right even when no one's looking, but I think also do what's right even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Especially when it's hard.
Right.
And, it could be as little as just listening to someone, giving up your time. I think that's one of the best ways to show true heroism.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the idea, is when you don't think of yourself as a hero, that's what makes you the hero. Honestly, that's everybody I brought on here, or I've invited to come on here, or whatever. Well, I'm not a hero. That's why you're a hero, because you're willing to give yourself for other people, and give yourself and the things that you're thinking about, and the things that you are going through, and your struggles and your failures and all these different things, and taking that ball of mess and being able to use that to help somebody else become a better person. And I think it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And you have my gratitude. And as Jeff would say, from a couple podcasts ago, you have our gratitude.
Oh, Jeff.
But I want to thank you for coming on. And like I said, if you're struggling, seek that help. and talk, even if it's just talking to friends and family.
Yep.
Talk to people that you trust and talk to people that you know, and they'll be able to have your best interests at heart. Don't talk to somebody you want to hear from or who you think that likes you or whatever. No, go after those people that honestly care and want to see you succeed in life, and they don't want anything out of it. So until next time, she has been Susie, I've been Ken, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. And we will talk to you next time. We are clear.